Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today is another little tutorial for you, and this time it is another cross stitch one, but I'm showing you how to make one of these. This is called a Biscornu. It is 8 corners or 8 sides, and it just uses 2 squares of cross stitch. So a Biscornu is a small octagonal stuffed ornamental pincushion. This is exactly what this is. Now it is French. It means skewed, quirky, irregular, bizarre, and yeah, basically you are offsetting 2 squares to create 8 points. And I will put all the details down below for this actual cross stitch pattern. It is by the Urban Stitches over on Etsy. So if you want to make this exact one, I'll put all the details down below for you as well. So let's get started, shall we? For this tutorial, you are going to need your cross stitch piece. Now I've got 4 squares here. This pattern is from Urban Stitches, and I'm only going to be using 2 of these squares. You're going to need some thread or embroidery thread, some stuffing, so we can make it nice and puffy. I've got some needles over here, and then I also have a pair of scissors. So let's get these cut out, and then I'll show you what is next. So that's my 2 squares cut out. You can see that I've used 14 count Aida for this piece. So I have left 5 unstitched stitches or unstitched spaces all the way around. That gives us a nice border. Now the first thing we're going to need to do before we start sewing this together is to stitch a back stitch, so an outline all the way around this outside edge. Now you can either do it on the same stitches you've already stitched, or I'm actually going to stitch one out. So I'm going to stitch my back stitch line 1 stitch away from my final stitching piece, and that's what we're going to end up sewing together. So you can see I've started to go around the outside edge with a back stitch. I have got 2 strands, but what I've done is used 1 strand and then folded it in half, and that way it's going to be a little bit more secure when we come to sew it together. So I'm literally going all the way around with a very simple back stitch, and I'm going to go all the way back to here and do that on both pieces. Okay, so you can see that I have gone all the way around both of my squares now with that running stitch, that back stitch. So now I'm just going to quickly press just with my fingers. They don't need to be pressed with an iron, all of the edges under. So I'm pressing them towards the back. That's just going to help us get them to sit nicely together. I'm going to do that with both squares. And then you're going to need to thread up a needle. Now you could do this with a contrasting thread or the same colour thread. It is entirely up to you, and we are going to do a whip stitch. But we need to offset it slightly, so we're not doing edge to edge. We need to find the centre and then a corner. So you can see I've pressed, just finger pressed over the edges so that these fold under. So what I'm going to do is I've got my needle. I'm going to do 1 stitch in the very corner. So I'm coming up through that corner, and I'm actually going to go down. It doesn't matter which stitch you use. I'm just going into the excess seam that we've got. And then what I want to do is come back up that corner point. So I'm just going to run it under the thread that's already there, and that way it's not going to unravel as soon as I bring it back up. So I use a loop start for all of my starts. So I'm just going to fold down that corner, so it's just tucked under, and then I'm going to find the center of my other piece. So my other normally this works better if you've got an even number But where we've got an odd number, that's absolutely fine. What I'm going to do is stitch through both parts of the corner through that stitch. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've come up in the corner itself and I'm going to go under that central stitch. Okay, now I like to work from right to left when I'm whip stitching because my needle goes this way. So I'm going to go into that first stitch and back into the one I've just gone under. So I'm going under 2 stitches. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just tilt our work so that each of our back stitches match with another one. So that central one is on the edge. I'm going to go under the next stitch and under the one next to it. Okay. So I'm crossing over the top and then I'm going to go to the next one. So I'm picking up that stitch and picking up the stitch next to it. That's where my needle is going. And I'm just going to continue until I get to the next corner. So we can see that it's been whipped together. Now if you wanted to add beads to this, you could easily do that by just picking up a bead every couple of stitches so they're not all bunched up. And you could pick up a bead before you go through the 2 stitches. And it just gives a nice delicate edge to it. So I'm going to stitch all the way to the first corner and then I'll show you what we're going to do next. I've got a couple more stitches left and then I'm going to show you the corner. So one, and then actually this is my central point. So we can see this is the middle of my pattern. So I'm going to stitch this one into the last one from that edge. So we can see that's the last one from this edge. And then what we're going to do is tuck under that corner of fabric. I'm going to go back into the same stitch on my flat square. And then I'm going to rotate my fabric and pull the edges to meet each other again. Now it's a little bit fiddly to get started, but what I'm actually going to do is go into that first stitch of the next row. So for every time you get to a corner, both sides of that corner need to go into that central stitch. So into that first stitch of the next side. That will help us turn that corner. Now as I said, it's a little bit fiddly, so go into the next stitch, then come under your next stitch. So this is the second one, not the first one, that's right on that edge. And you'll get this ladder. Again, next stitch from the flat piece, next stitch from your corner. After you've done a few, you'll be able to pull that thread and that corner will fold round on its own. So I'm going to do this last one and then I'm going to pull my thread. So we can see we've got this little lattice going on. So I'm going to push the fabrics together. Now if you want to, you can pin these. That's absolutely fine to hold it in place. So then I'm going to pull that thread. So we can see I've pulled that thread nice and tight. That corner is now sitting a lot nicer. and then we're going to continue down to the left to the next corner, and then we're going to repeat, and you're going to go all the way around until you've got one section left. We need that open so that we can put some stuffing in before we seal it up. So I'm going to show you a couple more stitches on this one, then I'll repeat the next corner, and then you'll be able to complete the rest and then come back when you are ready to sew it up. So when you're ready to sew up that last section. Now you can take your time, you can go through one and pull your needle through before you go through the other side. I just like to try and do both at the same time. So I'm now back to the next corner. I've got that one stitch there, and then we're back to this point. So remember the run on the right side of your corner, you're going to come under that and then under the central. So this is the center stitch from my other square. I'm then going to go under the next part of that corner, so the other side, the left one, and again back under that central stitch. Now don't pull too tight, tuck under that corner, and then we're going to run some more stitches. Again, start with just a loose ladder and we can tighten it up after. So first stitch, second stitch, and third stitch. That should be enough, so we can see that little lattice. So I'm going to just tuck the fabrics under and pull that so it sits nice and flat. There we go. So that is the very beginnings of our Biscornu. So as I said, continue all the way around. If you need to come back to this part of the video for the corners, then you can rewind. Continue all the way around until you get to your last corner, which is this one, and we're going to stuff it. Okay, so pause the video, continue around and come back to find me. As you can see, I've gone all the way around. I just have this little opening left now, so I'm going to unthread my needle just so it doesn't get in the way. Tuck in those excess seam allowances that we've got, so that excess fabric, and just pull it apart so we've got this little opening. Okay, then we're just going to simply fill it with lots of stuffing. So this is toy stuffing, just in case it ever splits open. I'm going to need to stuff it quite a lot. It's surprising how much you can get in such a small space. So I'm going to keep going until it's nice and puffy and all filled up inside. Now, if you get your finger in, you can push it all into all of those 8 corners that we've got. So I still need a little bit more. And you want to get it so it feels quite firm, because that's going to really help build its shape up. So we can see that it's getting nice and firm now. I think I might actually put all of this stuffing in. So make sure you get into all of the corners. as well. Okay, so it's nice and firm now. And the stuffing's not coming out, so that's a good sign. Yeah, I think we're good. So it's nice and firm. Okay, I've already stitched into the two sides of my corner. I'm literally going to use the last of my thread. I'm hoping it will reach. If not, I will show you how to add a new thread. And I'm literally going to whip all the way across until I get to that final corner again. Go into that point, into the same one, which was the center point here. And then we'll tie off our thread. You can see I've got just a couple more stitches to go. So 1 and 2. And then that last, just one more stitch into that corner if you can get in there. Don't worry if you can't though. And pull that thread nice and tight. And then that is our Biscornu all sewn up. So what I then do is just do a very simple knot finish with my thread. So I make a loop with my thread, go into one of the previous stitches and bring my needle up through the middle. And I do that a couple of times. Just to secure, and I always try to do it at a point because it's less noticeable. Then once we've got that nice and secure, we can simply pass our needle through, run it underneath, and I just poke it out a little bit further on, pull so that that knot has now gone inside. Okay, so there's no knot visible on top, and then I can trim off that excess thread. And then that is finished. It's all sewn up. Now there is another way of ending it completely, so we can pull the center in so it squeezes it down. Now you can just add some stitches into there through both of the center points, or you could add a button or a bead and that just pulls it in quite nicely. So I'm going to do that and then show you the finished product. Now all you need to do is make sure you are squeezing between the two center points and that your needle goes through both points, otherwise it will get stuck inside. And just make sure you are coming up through that center square. So let's do that and I'll show you the finished piece. So that is your finished Biscornu. You can see that I've not added any buttons or beads just because I wanted to keep the pattern all visible. And if you want to make your own using this exactly same pattern, I will put the links down below for you to Urban Stitches. So thank you for making along with me today, and I look forward to seeing all of your lovely Biscornus. Remember, you can tag me on Instagram at the House of Langford and at Overall Sews. And I'll see you all again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.